Hi, Bill Henshaw here again on my YouTube channel, and I've had some particularly good results of late, particularly in traffic courts, quote unquote, and using my jury instructions, 572 of them. And it occurs to me it's probably time for me to start to branch out here a little bit because the issues that you raise in traffic court, all of them apply, for example, to mortgage banksters. Note the word mortgage, M-O-R-T, mort, death, and also to student loans, both of which have in common a lot of legal issues that fit into my unopposed issues and will even challenge the status and standing of the mortgage banksters to come into our judicial court. And the good news here is that these attorneys are going to be the cream of the crop from Harvard, Yale, whatever, and they're going to have some idea of exactly what it is I am doing here. And they will also know if we get one decision on the record, most particularly with the 9-0 farts, the ball game is over. That's a binding precedent from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon. That's way too dangerous for them to risk, and I think we can get them to the bargaining table with a lot of leverage and get you out from under. I've got some amazing issues here that include, for example, that Congress has apparently somehow delegated the authority to the president, God knows on what provisions of the Constitution, to define the standard dollar. Now, if they did that, that's the president acting in times of emergency pursuant to the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, 12 U.S.C. 95 A and B, for those of you that want to look it up. Now, if he can do that as commander-in-chief and define the dollar, then what in the world does that tell you about the jurisdiction of the courts these banksters operate in? That makes it federal, regional, martial law, but we are entitled to common law judicial courts. Those are the ones they can't even get into. You'll learn all that by acquiring my materials and going from there, but there's some astounding issues there. And they've never, so far as I know, been at least before the 9-0 farts, except for one case, the Gold Clause case in 1932, Norman v. B&O Railroad. And the dissenters, it was 5-4, here we go again in that time era. And the dissenters, noted in their dissent that no question is raised in this case about the ability of the president to define the standard dollar. If the attorneys would have raised that issue, I think the court would have been obligated to rule on it, and that would have been ruled an unlawful delegation of authority. Now, the court can do it anyway, by the way. They say themselves that they have the power to rule on issues that are not directly before them. That's a situation where they should have done it. But you can see the magnitude of the issue, that if the president can define it, that's real trouble. And it gets even worse because I have the then chairman of the Federal Reserve, Mariner S. Eccles, saying in front of the House Subcommittee on Banking and Finance that the dollar is not defined, that we create money, that debt is money. If there were no debt, there would be no money. These are the issues we start have to bring against not only the mortgage banksters, but for those of you that have a lot of student loan, it's the same thing. Because what they do, in effect, and they've said it themselves, create money, quote unquote, out of thin air, and then want you to pay the bastards back over 25 or 30 years, from your blood, sweat, and tears, your time and labor, which is your property. They don't have anything on their side of the equation that's in related to substance, which a common law contract you have to have. You can't just make it up on one side out of thin air and then come against you for 30 years and take everything you got in the way of your property. That's the inequity that exists there. And that's another issue you can be damn sure hasn't properly been before the courts, and certainly not the 9-0 farts. So that's where I'm headed. And those of you that are interested, I will accept applicants that, we hit it off right. We have hit it right off, and we have good trust and a good situation, and for a very minimal amount of funding, particularly compared to what one of the damn State Bar Association attorneys would charge you if they understood the issue and or had the backbone to present it. There's only one attorney I've ever known that did that, Jerome Daly in Minnesota, that got the Federal Reserve declared unconstitutional by a Minnesota trial court, but it got reversed in the Minnesota Supreme Court, and he found himself subsequently disbarred, and the Fed came after him and charged him with a whole lot of fake tax violation things. They convicted him, put him on 18 years probation, and ordered him not to talk about any of this. Fortunately for me and some others, I was with the society when I first started out in the 80s. He came by and visited us for a couple of our monthly meetings, and he did violate his probation by talking about these issues. So that's where I learned, and I've developed it ever since. And the other thing with Jerome, by the way, with the 18 years probation and all that was, I did not know at that time, I found out later, that he was a key part of a big case called Turner versus American Bar that came out about 1970. I don't have the citation off the top of my head. But what they did was try to challenge exactly what I'm doing, what I call the malignant, malevolent monopoly of the state bar associations. But 40 years ago, 50 years ago, they didn't understand the real effect of the 14th Amendment, and they went in there trying to use those arguments, which you can't do. And they got summarily beaten. The cases got thrown out of court, and that was the end of it. The interesting part about that was, though, that somehow, and if I had known this when I knew Jerome, I would have asked him to give me copies of documents they used to disqualify every federal judge in the United States from this case. And they forced the then Chief Justice Warren E. Bastard Burger to appoint a special master, and he's the one that threw the stuff out. But a very interesting story there. But that money issue, you start getting into there, there's some astounding things that make a lot of sense when you think about it, but not when they never taught you in the mandatory public education system. I didn't learn 50 years ago either, but I know. So anybody that wants to, send me an email at youwinnincourt@gmail.com, I will review what I get and contact you. And with serious applicants, I'll take on more than one in each of these disciplines with student loan and with mortgage banksters. And we'll see what we can do here. And we might get much further and much quicker than you would think, because you're going to have a lot of leverage. Oh, please remember to like my videos and subscribe too. Thank you.